Hello everyone, Brent here. Since the Edgerunners 1.6 patch and the announcement of the Phantom Liberty expansion, Cyberpunk 2077 has seen a massive boom in players across all systems, with peak concurrent players reaching around 1 million players per day for about a week during the hype period over the anime and expansion announcement. With a slew of gamers, both new and old, playing Cyberpunk 2077, also came a slew of fresh YouTube videos talking about if the game was quote-unquote worth playing in 2022. Since I just completed the game, I felt like it was my turn to throw my thoughts into the ring. I've been thinking a lot about how I wanted to frame this review because with so many people having played it when it first came out and playing it now, there's loads of traditional reviews out there now. Furthermore, as I mentioned a bit ago, there's even more videos out there talking about if the game is worth playing in 2022. So I didn't want to do another video like that either. Instead, I'm going to just describe my experience giving this game a second chance along with some of the aforementioned elements sprinkled in. I should also mention that as I was playing Cyberpunk 2077, I really wanted to focus on playing and experiencing the game. I did my best to get plenty of gameplay footage, but I may not have gotten footage from every aspect of the game. So if I mention some parts of the game and I don't present footage of that particular thing, that's the reason why. To properly describe my experience with Cyberpunk 2077, we have to go back to 2013 when I first heard about the game. I remember I was at a friend's house and he was like, "You gotta see this trailer for this game that's coming out." Yeah, you remember that trailer, the one where the NCPD agents are killing the female cyber psycho in the streets and that awesome song is playing while all of that's going down. Yeah, that trailer. We all remember that trailer, and at the end of it, it reads, "Coming when ready." That trailer premiered at the end of the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation, and who would have thunk that that statement would mean that the game wouldn't release for another 7 years or so? Over the years, I mostly forgot about Cyberpunk. I mean, some news would trickle in from time to time that would remind me that the game still existed, but nothing of great value. Some concept art here or a small story update there, but basically nothing was reported about it until pretty much after the release of The Witcher 3. Then, in 2018, we get our first glimpse of the game with a 48-minute long gameplay reveal where it shows off several of the missions from the first chapter of the game. During this time, I wasn't really paying too much attention to this reveal because I had bigger fish to fry when it came to gaming, like playing God of War or Spider-Man. Next, in 2019, we get the announcement at E3 that Keanu Reeves was attached to play Johnny Silverhand in the game. And I don't think anybody will ever forget that presentation.
You're breathtaking.
Anyways, even at the time, I wasn't really interested in the game. Although I was excited for the game back in 2013, that excitement had worn off. Throughout 2020, I was further put off by the game by its continuous delays. Look, I get it. The world was in the midst of a global pandemic, which caused many developers from many studios to work from home, which I can only imagine made things extremely difficult. But the game was delayed 3 times in a single year. And this was a game that was supposedly in development for 7 or 8 years at this time, and it raised some serious red flags for me. It was only when I found out that Night City was loosely based on and inspired by a small town along the central coast of California called Morro Bay, which just so happened to be the city I was living in at the time in an area that I had spent most of my life in, that I started to really get excited for this game. I mean, there are so many games that take place in LA or New York inspired locales that I thought it was really cool that a game took place in a city that was inspired by a little town in California that I just so happened to be living in. So I went ahead and bought the game day one. I should specify that I had a PlayStation 5 at this time, so I was able to play Cyberpunk 2077 on next-gen hardware, allowing me to have a solid experience. The only off-putting thing that I experienced right off the bat was the size of the game. I think it clocked in well over 100 gigs. I remember that it had been downloading for some time and I wanted to start streaming it, but it still had like 60 gigs to go. Needless to say, I didn't get to play much that first night that it was out. When I finally did get a chance to play, I had a pretty good time with it. It ran incredibly well, even though there were plenty of weird glitches that would pop up, but nothing I experienced was game-breaking and the game did look good. Overall, my first impressions of the game were really positive. Although my initial impressions were good, I won't sit here and deny that Cyberpunk 2077 had a poor launch and wasn't fun for everyone. And even saying all of that is putting it lightly. I mean, we all remember how it looked on the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. In my opinion, the game should have been a next-gen launch title exclusive to the Xbox Series X, PlayStation 5, and PC at minimum. But frankly, it should have spent another year in development so that way it could be fully optimized for next-gen hardware, and it could get all those weird bugs sorted out. Although I had tons of fun playing the game at launch, and my first impressions of the game were great, overall, I was incredibly underwhelmed. At the time, I liked to joke that it was the best Bethesda game that I had ever played due to all of its weird bugs and glitches. After only a couple of weeks, I ended up putting the game down without completing it. And I went on to play like Persona 5 Royal or something. I can't really remember. Basically, I forgot about the game up until August of this year, 2022. I decided to start playing the game again since it had a free PS5 upgrade, and I was hearing rumors that it was in exponentially better shape than it was 2 years prior. And when I first turned it back on, I discovered that those rumors were pretty accurate. Everything was a lot more detailed and polished, and character models didn't glitch out. It was still the same game for sure, but it played so smoothly that it felt like the next-gen game that it always should have been. I was hooked. At the time I started playing it again, it was a few weeks prior to the patch 1.6 and the Edgerunners anime. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't even know that there was an anime coming out, let alone another patch. And I was still loving the game. I spent 40 in-game hours playing around in Cyberpunk 2077 when 1.6 dropped, and that's when things changed all over again for me. I took a weekend off from playing the game and I watched the anime, which I loved. My review is linked in the description of this video. And because I was simping pretty hard for Lucy, and like everyone else who had started playing Cyberpunk again, I started the game entirely over just so that way I could build a character that was similar to Lucy, even though I had already dumped a ton of hours into another character. Trust me, I would have loved to have been able to rework my existing character to fit that build, but I was so far deep into a different playstyle that it would have been really difficult for me to take that character and switch it to a mostly intelligence-based character. I want to touch a little bit more on that a little later though. Anyways, I can't begin to tell you how much fun I had playing this game. There was something to do around almost every corner and interesting characters to interact with. Furthermore, the game doesn't really punish you too much for playing the way that you want to play. Sure, Regina would prefer for you to keep all the cyber psychos alive, and maybe Wakako wants you to do something super stealthy, but if you run in guns blazing, killing everything and doing whatever you want, the worst kind of trouble that you'll probably get into would maybe be reduced payment or a talking to by whatever character gave you that mission. The point is, you can play however way you want to play. By the way, net running is truly the way to go. Quick hacking and breaching is so incredibly broken, it's insane. And once it's super leveled up, it's incredibly satisfying. The story is decent enough, and the side quests you'll come across will range from heartwarming, depressing, to downright creepy. For example, there was a side quest where I helped a guy get crucified, which was equally parts funny and disturbing. I think my favorite quest lines were the Pan Am ones and the Carrie ones. Carrie was cool because he was one of Johnny's old bandmates, and you get to help him through some tough times. Pan Am and Carrie are just some of the characters that you'll meet along the way, all of whom are interesting and will have different reactions to things that you say based on what your life path is and what attributes that you picked up throughout the game. I think my favorite aspect of this game is the relationship between V and Johnny. V's and Johnny's interactions with each other feel really organic, and they actually have impeccable chemistry. This is probably one of my favorite performances by Keanu Reeves. I'll admit though, he was a little wooden at the beginning, but once the game really gets going, everything starts to feel and sound really good, and it was like he was meant for the role. Furthermore, Sharmi Lee killed it as female V. Their relationship can evolve into one of mutual respect and understanding, to one of frustration and resentment, depending on which missions you choose to do and the responses that you give in those missions. If there is one thing that I can change about this game, it's respecking. You can reset your perk points for a certain amount of in-game currency, however you can't reset your attribute points, and attribute points are more important than perk points when it comes to playstyle. Like I mentioned earlier, I had to start a brand new character in order to play a Lucy-inspired character, and this was because I couldn't redo my attribute points. To some degree, I can understand that if you start something, you should finish it. However, when playing RPGs like this, I'll often find myself starting the game one way, and as I progress, I find myself leaning toward a different way of playing, and I will often respec my ability points to suit that new playstyle. Most RPGs only have one point system, and if you want to change things up, you can move those points around, usually at a cost. In Cyberpunk 2077, you can't do that. And it would have been really nice to be able to have at least a limited number of times that you can redistribute your attribute points. I mean, for crying out loud, games like Elden Ring allow you to do it. Look, folks, this game is still far from perfect, but damn is it fun to play. And for me, that's all that matters. I believe that anyone or anything is worthy of a second chance. You just have to make sure that that second chance counts, because you rarely get a third chance, especially in the gaming world. Gamers these days are entitled and demanding, and I can certainly be that way too. Tens of millions of dollars are thrown at games these days, and with the right financial backers and the right amount of time, games should be damn near perfect when released. These days, there should no longer be any excuses for releasing an incomplete game at launch. The writing was on the wall with Cyberpunk 2077 too. Long development cycles and many delays are never a good sign. However, the folks over at CD Projekt Red have spent the past 2 years making things right, and it seems like they will be continuing to make things right. Unfortunately, Cyberpunk 2077's history will forever be tainted by a poor launch, and I hope that CD Projekt Red has learned from it and other developers view it as a cautionary tale as to what could happen when you put out a product that isn't ready yet. If anyone from any developer is watching this video, trust me when I say that any reasonable gamer, which most of us are, would much rather have a game that is delayed than a game that isn't finished at launch. Unfortunately, it's only the angry Twitter mob that gets heard and drowns out the reasonable gamers. There's so many other games that can be played as we wait for a completed, polished game. Anyways, back to Cyberpunk to wrap things up. If there ever was a time to try Cyberpunk 2077, that time is now. Despite a few glitches here and there, the game is incredibly fun to play and to look at. It's got an interesting story with fun characters, along with different choices and dialogue options that affect the story and you as a character. If there ever was a game that deserves a second chance, Cyberpunk 2077 is that game, because it actually earned it. Well, folks, that about does it for me. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and for more videos just like it, please hit that subscribe button. Well, everyone, until the next video, take care.